During his mission, the assassin was momentarily distracted by a beautiful woman. Fortunately, he was well trained and quickly refocused his sniper scope on the target. Even after 5 days of stakeout, his instinct betrayed him as he stole another glance at the woman. Realizing the danger of her wavering attention, he stabilized his emotions, took one last look and finally found his optimal heart rate. Paul focused intently, tightening his grip on the weapon, ready to deliver a fatal shot. Paul pulled the trigger without hesitation. However, to his shock, the woman turned around at that moment and inadvertently blocked the bullet. Paul quickly reloaded for a second shot, only to discover the bodyguards rushing in to draw the curtains. Knowing his opportunity was lost and that prolonged delay might expose his location, Paul immediately packed up his sniper rifle. He swiftly cleared the scene of any fallen shell casings and incriminating evidence. Following a pre-planned escape route, he dashed downstairs, hopped on a prearranged motorbike, bypassed all the incoming patrol cars and disappeared into a quiet alley. There, he discarded the weapon while avoiding the patrolling police cars. Finally, he reached a small convenience store, entered the restroom, shed his clothes, meticulously cleansed off the scent of gunpowder and shaved his beard. Switching into a clean attire for a fresh appearance, he exited the store, hailed a cab to the airport and disposed his handgun in a trash bin. As he lined up for boarding, he spotted a sniffer dog scanning passengers. Uncertain if he could evade the dog's detection, Paul abandoned the flight, retreated to the restroom and thoroughly cleaned himself again before leaving. He even wiped down the sink he used, as no detail could expose him. Hallmark precision of a top-tier assassin. At the service desk to book an additional flight, his boss unexpectedly phoned to notify him of the botched mission. The employer made it clear his failure wouldn't be overlooked. Paul now confronted not just police pursuit but also a vendetta from his employer. While boarding the next flight, he became aware of a man in sunglasses discreetly observing him. Extremely vigilant after landing, he arranged a transfer flight, yet the man in sunglasses shadowed him. Even while waiting for the next flight, the enigmatic man lingered, not letting Paul out of sight. To ensure safety, Paul rescheduled for the following day's flight and checked into the airport hotel to observe the man's movements. If the stranger was indeed an assassin after him, this would be the perfect chance to take action. Fortifying his room with improvised alarms using a glass and a basin, Paul sat armed with a dining knife, fully on guard. After an entire night of vigilance, the stranger never showed. Relieved, Paul boarded his flight home the next day. After landing, he retrieved his car from the airport parking lot. He drove through city streets, doubling back multiple times to ensure he wasn't tailed, before venturing deep into the forest 200 kilometers away to his home. Upon arrival, he noticed large footprints and numerous cigarettes at his doorstep. He knew someone had been lying in wait. Quickly arming himself with a handgun from his car, Paul circled to the back door and entered his house stealthily. Inside, he found a wrecked living room and traces of blood on the walls. He immediately called his wife, only to learn she had been injured by 2 thugs and was now in the hospital. From her, he discovered the assailants had fled in a green taxi. Armed with this clue, Paul moved his wife to a secure location. Within his backyard, he dug out his assassin kit, assembled his gear with weapons and a counterfeit identity, and ventured onto the streets to track down the elusive green taxi. Identifying one such taxi, he spotted its company name and pretended to be a passenger claiming to have misplaced an item inside. When the administrator opened the door to help, Paul swiftly neutralized him and gained access to the company records. Analyzing the records, he located the green taxi's movement from the day prior to his residence, uncovering the name of its owner, a man named Curly. Paul caused damage to the office to make it appear like a burglary before departing. On the following day, he tailed Curly, posing as a passenger, and forced him at gunpoint to reveal specifics about the 2 assassins. Curly, vividly recalling the details of the assassins, disclosed they had arrived on a private jet and subsequently hired him to drive them deep into the forest to an isolated estate. After lingering for an hour, Curly noticed them returning with bloodstains before driving them back to the airport as they instructed. Describing their physical appearances, he mentioned one was heavily built, while the other was thin and wiry. Extracting this information, Paul eliminated Curly without delay, ensuring nothing was left uncovered. As a seasoned elite assassin, leaving no threat unresolved had become second nature. Though Paul didn't know the killer's identities, he was certain that his employer held the answers. After all, the attackers knew his address. Disguising himself as a cleaner, Paul infiltrated his employer's office building by blending in with delivery personnel, trailing them to the 4th floor. After the courier left the boss's office, Paul seized the moment, rushed in, subdued the secretary at the door with a gun. He ordered her to tie Charles to a chair first, then bind herself in the bathroom. But when Paul closed the door, he deliberately left a crack to keep an eye on the secretary's movements. On the surface, Charles was a lawyer, but he secretly handled assassination contracts. Paul's wife was hospitalized with severe injuries because someone ordered an attack through Charles. Charles explained that the employer wanted to send Paul a warning to be more careful on the job, but Paul demanded to know the identity of the client. But he refused to reveal the client's name. Without hesitation, Paul used a nail gun to drive steel nails into Charles's computer and phone. Charles immediately tried deception, claiming the client's information was stored exclusively in the computer and was now irretrievable. Paul didn't buy it. He drove 3 nails into Charles's chest, warning him he would suffocate if the nails weren't removed within 3 minutes. Charles still refused to disclose the information and tragically died within 3 minutes. Paul kept blood off the floor by carefully placing a newspaper under him. He hadn't anticipated that Charles, always calculating against others, would deteriorate so quickly. It seemed that scheming against others doesn't pay off after all. Paul then pushed dirt and trash into the room, packed Charles's body into a bag, cleaned up the scene, and opened the bathroom door. Paul found the secretary trembling in fear. The secretary voluntarily revealed that she knew the identity of the client. However, the information was at the secretary's home. Paul untied the secretary, carried Charles's body, and accompanied the secretary to the elevator. 2 other people entered the elevator. The secretary dared not call for help, aware of Paul's ruthlessness. Just a slight move could cost her life. The secretary took Paul to her house and retrieved the task order. On the back of the order were 2 phone numbers. The account holders were Killers, Big Drong, and Stick Sister. Another order contained information about the client named Edward. Having obtained what he wanted, Paul decided not to spare the secretary. While descending the stairs, he maintained his principles, abruptly breaking the secretary's neck and simulating an accidental fall. Paul disposed off Charles's body and used the order details to locate Big Drong's house. Discovering Big Drong owned an enormous guard dog, Paul brought stakes and tranquilizers to carefully drug it later in the night. Paul used the stake laced with tranquilizers to sedate the dog before strolling boldly through the front door. However, as Paul entered, the seasoned killer Big Drong sensed danger and launched an attack. Paul, caught off guard, was overwhelmed. Big Drong, a brute strength type killer, made direct confrontation impossible for Paul. Paul grabbed an iron hook from beside the bed and aimed for Big Drong's muscles. Unexpectedly, the well-trained Big Drong endured the pain and managed to grab a gun. Unable to counter, Paul fled into another room and found a gun tucked under the bed. The moment Big Drong arrived at the door, Paul successfully dealt with Big Drong, but the gunfire startled the sedated dog awake. The dog mistook Paul for an invader and lunged at him. Paul quickly stepped outside, igniting a torch and hurling it toward the house. Demonstrating a surprising tenderness despite his harsh nature, Paul spared the dog. With Big Drong out of the picture, Paul set his sights on Stick Sister. Tracking her movements, he found her dining at a Western restaurant during a date. Confidently walking inside, Paul calculated that if a woman were killed, her husband or boyfriend would likely be the first suspect. He waited until Stick Sister's boyfriend left for the restroom, then took his seat across from her and displayed his gun. Recognizing her inevitable fate, Stick Sister pleaded with Paul to let her finish her last meal. Paul, as a fellow assassin, granted her the dignity she requested. Afterward, Stick Sister asked for a final walk to romantically conclude her life. Unexpectedly, Paul shot her, ensuring her departure was painless and swift. With both hired killers eliminated, Paul gained a new perspective on life. Killers, constantly skirting death, live in the shadows thinking they prey on others, yet they themselves inevitably fall victim. However, Paul's task was not finished. These 2 were only contract killers. The true mastermind targeting him was Edward. Edward, a wealthy and influential man who constantly traveled in bulletproof cars, living in a high-security apartment guarded 24/7. Paul couldn't approach him directly. Instead, he slipped into the garage as the driver left and attempted to enter via the staircase. However, the inside door was locked, so Paul filmed the lock and remotely ordered an electronic key for it. The next day, Paul's duplicate key arrived. Following Edward to a fitness club, Paul covertly brushed past a janitor and tried to snatch the keys, but got his jacket caught instead. Seizing the key from the janitor, Paul accessed the locker room and opened Edward's locker, using the stolen key. Retrieving Edward's badge, he quickly duplicated it and left the club. Paul entered the garage with the purchased key, unlocked the small inner door, and used the duplicated badge to enter Edward's home, only to find himself in face-to-face awe with Edward's son. If you want more movie recaps like this, don't forget to like, share, and hit subscribe so you never miss the next one.